The charcoal smoke rose in lazy spirals above the Maddox family backyard, carrying with it the scent of grilling burgers and the sound of classic rock floating from weathered speakers. Emmett Maddox stood at the grill, spatula in hand, watching his wife Shannon navigate through their relatives with practiced ease, her genuine smile lighting up conversations as she went. It was the kind of August afternoon that existed in memory more than reality. Too perfect, too warm, the kind that made you forget winter ever happened. Emmett had spent the morning setting up tables in the shade of their old oak tree, stringing up lights he knew would look beautiful after sunset, preparing enough food to feed an army, because that's what you did when family came over. He'd grown up in foster care until age 14, bouncing between homes that treated him like a temporary problem to solve. Then the Hendersons took him in, a couple in their 50s who'd lost their own son to leukemia. They'd given him structure, purpose, and something he'd never had. Expectations that he could actually meet. He'd rewarded their faith by putting himself through community college while working construction, eventually becoming a licensed structural engineer. Nothing in his life had come easy, but he'd learned that the hard things were often worth doing. Shannon had been his first real relationship, the first person who saw past his defensive walls to the man underneath. They'd met at a community center where he volunteered teaching basic carpentry to at-risk kids. She was there running an art program, paint under her fingernails, patience in her eyes. 7 years married now, and he still considered her the best decision he'd ever made. Uncle Emmett! The voice pulled him from his thoughts. His niece Amy Livingston came running across the lawn, her small feet kicking up grass clippings. She was 6 years old with her father's dark hair and her mother's hazel eyes, and she'd wrapped herself around his leg like she always did. "Hey, kiddo," Emmett said, ruffling her hair with his free hand. "You hungry? Got a burger here with your name on it." "Extra pickles?" Amy asked, looking up at him with that gap-toothed smile. "Would I forget?" She giggled and ran off toward the picnic table where other kids were already claiming seats. Emmett watched her go, something nagging at the back of his mind. It was hot, easily 90 degrees, and Amy was wearing a long-sleeved shirt and winter mittens, bright blue knitted things that looked absurdly out of place. His brother Ryan appeared at his elbow, beer in hand, already on his third by Emmett's count. Ryan was 2 years younger but looked older, with premature lines around his eyes and a hardness in his jaw that hadn't been there in their youth. They'd reconnected 5 years ago when Ryan tracked him down through social media, claiming he wanted to build a relationship with a brother he'd lost touch with when Emmett went into foster care. "Hell of a spread you got here, brother," Ryan said, clapping him on the shoulder with just a bit too much force. "Thanks for coming," Emmett replied, keeping his tone neutral. He'd never fully warmed to Ryan, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly why. Maybe it was the way his brother's stories never quite added up, or how he seemed to have a new get-rich-quick scheme every few months. Or maybe it was something deeper, something instinctual. "Hey, family's family, right?" Ryan took a long pull from his beer. "Even if we didn't grow up together, blood matters." Emmett nodded, flipping a burger. "How's the roofing business going?" "Ah, you know, summer's good, winter's slow. We make it work." Ryan's eyes drifted toward his daughter. "Amy, get over here and take those damn mittens off. You look ridiculous." Amy's head snapped up, and Emmett saw something flicker across her face. Was that fear? "I'm cold, Daddy," she called back, her voice small. Ryan laughed, the sound harsh and forced. "Cold? It's 95 degrees out here. She's just quirky. You know how kids are, always wanting attention." Amy had hunched her shoulders, making herself smaller at the table. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and Emmett noticed she was shivering despite the heat. "Maybe she's coming down with something," Emmett suggested, watching his niece carefully. "Nah, she's fine. Christy coddles her too much." Ryan drained his beer. "I'm grabbing another. You want one?" "I'm good." After Ryan wandered off toward the cooler, Emmett found his gaze drawn back to Amy. She was sitting very still now, her mittened hands folded in her lap, staring at the table like it held all the secrets of the universe. The other kids were playing tag around the yard, but Amy didn't join in. She never did, he realized. In all the family gatherings over the past 5 years, he couldn't remember seeing her play with the other children. Shannon appeared beside him, following his line of sight. "Something's off with that little girl," she said quietly, voicing the thought he'd been having. His wife had always been perceptive, one of the things he loved most about her. "The mittens," Emmett said, "and the long sleeves in August." Shannon bit her lip. I tried to talk to Christy earlier, but she just brushed me off, said Amy had a cold. Christy Livingston, Ryan's wife, was a thin woman with nervous energy and eyes that never quite met yours directly. She'd been hovering near Ryan all afternoon, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Emmett had always felt sorry for her, though he couldn't say exactly why. I'm going to check on her, Emmett decided, handing Shannon the spatula. Be subtle, Shannon warned. He approached the picnic table where Amy sat alone now, the other children having run off to jump in the small inflatable pool Shannon had set up. Up close, he could see the sweat soaking through her shirt, could hear the slight wheeze in her breathing. Hey, Amy girl, he said, sitting down beside her. You feeling okay? She nodded quickly, not meeting his eyes. Uh-huh. You sure? You look pretty hot in that shirt. I'm cold, she repeated. And this time, he heard the tremor in her voice. She was reciting a line, he realized. Something she'd been told to say. Emmett glanced back toward the grill where Ryan was talking to another guest, beer in hand, laughing at some joke. Christy was in the kitchen helping with side dishes. They were far enough away, distracted. Amy, look at me. He kept his voice gentle, the same tone he used with the scared kids in his carpentry classes. Did something happen to you? Her lower lip trembled. She was breathing faster now, on the edge of panic. It's okay. You're safe here, I promise. He waited, not pushing, just present. It was a skill he'd learned from Shannon. Sometimes silence spoke louder than questions. Finally, Amy whispered, I'm not supposed to tell. Cold dread settled in Emmett's stomach. Tell what, sweetheart? She looked up at him with eyes too old for her 6 years, and in them, he saw something he recognized from his own childhood. The knowledge that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones you needed protection from. I was bad, she said, her voice barely audible. I spilled my milk. Everybody spills milk sometimes, Emmett said carefully. That doesn't make you bad. Amy shook her head rapidly. Daddy said I was clumsy. He said if I keep being clumsy, I won't need these anymore. She held up her mittened hands. The dread became ice. Amy, can I see your hands? Just for a second? No. She pulled them back against her chest. I can't. I have to keep them on. Okay. Emmett raised his hands in surrender. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But he'd seen something in that brief moment when she lifted her hands. The mittens didn't quite fit right. They had a strange, flat quality to them, like they weren't filled out properly. Ryan's voice cut across the yard. Amy, stop bothering your uncle and get over here. Amy flinched, then scrambled off the bench and ran toward her father. Emmett watched her go, his mind racing. He stood slowly, walking back toward the grill on autopilot, his engineer's brain already working the problem from different angles. Everything okay? Shannon asked. No, Emmett said quietly. Something's very wrong. The rest of the barbecue passed in a blur. Emmett went through the motions, serving food, making small talk, laughing at jokes, but his attention never left Amy. She sat beside her mother, barely eating, still sweating in those mittens and long sleeves. Christy kept adjusting Amy's collar, smoothing her hair, whispering things in her ear that made the little girl shrink into herself. Ryan was getting progressively drunker, his voice getting louder, his jokes getting cruder. At one point, he grabbed Amy's shoulder hard enough that she yelped, and Emmett had to force himself to stay where he was. You need to relax, Ryan slurred, mistaking his daughter's pain for playfulness. Always so dramatic, just like your mother. As the sun began to set and family started packing up to leave, Emmett made his decision. He waited until Ryan announced he was going to the bathroom, watched Christy get pulled into a conversation with Shannon about some recipe, and then he moved. Amy was sitting on the back porch steps, away from the other kids, watching fireflies begin to emerge in the twilight. Hey, kiddo, Emmett said, sitting down beside her. I need you to trust me, okay? She looked at him with those haunted eyes. I think you're hurt, and I think you're scared to tell anyone. But I can help. I promise I can help. He paused. Will you let me see your hands? Just one. Just for a second. Amy's breath hitched. A tear rolled down her cheek. He'll know. I won't tell him you showed me. I swear. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, she extended her left hand. Her fingers trembled as she began to pull at the mitten. "I got it," Emmett said gently. Carefully, so carefully, he eased the blue knitted mitten off her hand. His world stopped. Where Amy's fingers should have been, there were only bandage stumps, recent bandages, not quite clean, with dark stains seeping through. The thumb remained, and what looked like half of her index finger. The rest were just gone. Emmett's vision tunneled. Sound became distant. He was distantly aware that his hands were shaking, that his breathing had gone shallow. Years of therapy after his own childhood abuse, years of learning to control his responses, and it all threatened to dissolve in that single moment. "Daddy did it," Amy whispered, "with his bolt cutters. He said I needed to learn." The words hit him like physical blows. "Learn what?" His voice didn't sound like his own. "Last week I spilled my milk 3 times. He said 3 fingers for 3 spills. That's fair." He said that's consequences. Emmett carefully slid the mitten back onto her hand, his movements mechanical. His mind had gone ice cold, crystal clear in a way it hadn't been since the last time someone had tried to hurt him in a foster home when he was 13. He'd put that man in the hospital. The Hendersons had hired a good lawyer. "Amy, listen to me very carefully," he said, and his voice was steady now, calm. "You're going to go back to your mom and you're going to act normal. Can you do that?" She nodded, frightened by the change in him. "Good girl. And Amy? This is never going to happen again. I promise you that." She believed him. He could see it in her eyes. Hope, fragile and desperate. "Now go on, and remember, act normal." After she left, Emmett sat on the porch steps for a long time, staring at nothing. Shannon found him there 10 minutes later. "Emmett, what's wrong? You look—" He turned to face his wife, and whatever she saw in his expression made her stop mid-sentence. "Get your phone," he said quietly. "We need to call someone." "Who?" "I'm still deciding." Shannon knew him well enough not to ask more questions. She simply sat beside him and took his hand, waiting. Inside the house, through the window, Emmett could see Ryan laughing at something, beer in hand, while Christy stood beside him with that nervous smile frozen on her face. And Amy, sitting in the corner, mittens still on, looking small and broken. Emmett had spent his whole life believing in rules, in systems, in doing things the right way. The Hendersons had taught him that society had order, laws, consequences. You didn't take justice into your own hands because that way led to chaos. But looking at his 6-year-old niece, at the bandages hidden under blue mittens, at the fear in her eyes and the cruel satisfaction in his brother's face, Emmett felt something fundamental shift inside him. The system had failed him as a child. It had shuffled him between homes, ignored the signs, filed away reports that never led anywhere. He'd survived despite it, not because of it. He would not let it fail Amy. "Shannon," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me honestly. Do you trust me?" She squeezed his hand. "With my life." "Then I need you to trust me now. What I'm about to do, it might not be legal. It definitely won't be pretty. But it's necessary." Shannon was quiet for a moment. Then, "What did he do to her?" Emmett told her. When he finished, Shannon's face had gone white, but her grip on his hand had tightened. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Time, and an alibi when the time comes. You've got both." They sat together as the last of the guests departed, as Ryan and Christy packed up their things and loaded Amy into their car. Emmett watched them drive away, memorizing the license plate number, the make and model of the car, the direction they headed. Then he went inside, pulled out his laptop, and began to plan. Emmett didn't sleep that night. While Shannon fidgeted restlessly beside him, he sat in his home office, the blue light of his computer screen illuminating his face as he worked. First, he compiled everything he knew about Ryan. The information was depressingly sparse. His brother had been a ghost for most of Emmett's life. Different foster homes, different paths. They'd only reconnected after Ryan had found him on social media, reaching out with stories of wanting to know his only brother. Emmett had been cautiously hopeful. He'd met Christy, met Amy when she was barely a year old, tried to build a relationship, invited them to holidays, helped Ryan get construction jobs when work was slow. He'd wanted to believe in the possibility of family, real family, after spending so much of his life without it. What a fool he'd been. Now, working backwards through social media posts, public records, and employment histories, a different picture emerged. Ryan had a pattern. short-term jobs, frequent moves, gaps in employment that coincided with Amy's doctor visits, according to the few medical records Emmett could access through less than legal means. He'd learned some hacking skills from a friend in IT, favors traded for helping rewire his house. At 3 in the morning, Emmett found the first foster care report. Ryan had been removed from a home at age 11 for behavioral issues. The details were sealed, but the foster parent had filed a complaint about concerning violent behavior toward smaller children. At 4 in the morning, he found the second report. A school counselor's note from when Ryan was 13, expressing concern about sadistic tendencies and lack of empathy. Recommended evaluation. No follow-up in the file. At 5 in the morning, Emmett sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. The picture was clear now. Ryan wasn't just a bad father. He was a predator who'd found a perfectly legal victim in his own daughter. And Christy? Emmett still wasn't sure about Christy. Was she a victim too, or an enabler, or both? Shannon appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her hair messy from sleep. "Come to bed." "I can't, Shannon." His voice cracked on the words. He cut off her fingers. With bolt cutters, because she spilled milk. "She's 6 years old." Shannon crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. He let himself lean into her just for a moment, drawing strength from her presence. "We're calling CPS in the morning," she said. "I already did. Last night after they left." Shannon pulled back to look at him. "And?" "They took a report, said they'd send someone to do a welfare check." Emmett's laugh was bitter. "A welfare check? Like that's going to accomplish anything. It's the first step." "The first step toward what?" "They'll interview Ryan. He'll have some story ready. They'll look at Amy. She'll be too scared to talk. Best case scenario, they file a report and add it to a pile of other reports that never lead anywhere. Worst case, Ryan knows someone's onto him and he gets better at hiding it." "So what are you suggesting?" Emmett turned back to his computer, pulling up a series of documents he'd been assembling. "I'm suggesting we build a case so airtight that they can't ignore it. Evidence, witnesses, medical records, everything. How? I'm still working that out." Over the next week, Emmett became a ghost in his own life. He went through the motions at work, designing structural supports for buildings and signing off on inspections, but his mind was elsewhere. Every spare moment was dedicated to the investigation. He started with Amy's medical records. A friend from college worked in medical billing at the county hospital, and after some careful conversation and a promise of future favors, Emmett learned that Amy had been treated there 3 times in the past 2 years. Broken arm, story, fell off playground equipment. Concussion, story, fell downstairs. Burns on her legs, story, accident with hot water. None of the treating physicians had reported suspected abuse. Standard questions had been asked, standard answers accepted. The system had looked and seen nothing. Emmett dug deeper. He found neighbors in the apartment complex where Ryan lived, a rundown building on the east side of town. Most didn't want to talk, but one older woman, Mrs. Patterson, invited him in for tea. "I mind my own business usually," she said, settling into a worn armchair in her living room that smelled of cats and lavender. "But that little girl, I hear her crying sometimes, through the walls." "How often?" Emmett asked, keeping his voice casual despite the rage building in his chest. "Couple times a week, at least. And there's yelling. The father, mostly. He's got a temper." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "I called the police once. Must be 6 months ago. They came, knocked on the door, talked to the father for a few minutes, and left. Nothing changed." "Did you see anyone else? Social workers, CPS?" "No, dear. No one." Emmett thanked her and left, adding her testimony to his growing file. He started following Ryan. Not every day, he couldn't risk being spotted, but enough to establish patterns. His brother worked sporadically, picking up roofing jobs through a contractor who didn't ask too many questions. Between jobs, he drank a lot. There was a bar he favored, a dive called Max's, where he'd spend entire afternoons nursing beers and shooting pool. Emmett watched from his car across the street, documenting times and dates, building a pattern of neglect to add to the pattern of abuse. On Thursday night, 9 days after the barbecue, Emmett's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Maddox, this is Detective Christine Barnwell with Child Protective Services. I'm calling about the report you filed regarding your niece, Amy Livingston." "Finally. Yes. Thank you for calling back. Did you do the welfare check?" "We did." I visited the home myself 3 days ago. There was a pause. Mr. Maddox, I understand your concern, but we found no evidence of abuse. Amy appeared healthy, the home was clean, and both parents were cooperative. She had a minor injury to her hand. A minor injury? Emmett's voice rose despite his best efforts. She's missing 3 fingers. Mr. Livingston explained that there was an accident with a lawnmower. Amy confirmed the story. The injuries had been properly treated at an urgent care facility, and a doctor signed off on the treatment. These things happen, unfortunately. Emmett closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe. She was wearing mittens in August because she was hiding the bandages. She told me her father did it. Those were her exact words. Children often confuse accidents with intentional acts, especially at that age. And Mr. Maddox, I have to be frank. Mr. Livingston mentioned that you and he have had some family disagreements, that you might be trying to cause trouble for him. That's a lie. I'm not saying you are. I'm just telling you what was said. Look, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know abuse when I see it. This wasn't it. I'm sorry, but the case is closed. She hung up before he could respond. Emmett sat in his car outside the bar where Ryan was currently drinking away another afternoon, and he stared at the phone in his hand. The system had failed, just like he'd known it would. Okay, he said quietly to the empty car. We do this my way. Shannon found him in the basement at midnight, surrounded by maps, photographs, and handwritten notes covering every surface of his workbench. She'd given him space for the past week, trusting that he needed time to process, but now she descended the stairs with 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression. Talk to me, she said, handing him a cup. Emmett took a long sip, organizing his thoughts. His wife deserved the truth. CPS closed the case. They believed Ryan's story about a lawnmower accident. That's insane. It gets worse. He's poisoned the well, told them I'm trying to cause trouble, that we have family disagreements. If I push harder through official channels, they'll just see me as a vindictive relative. Emmett spread his hands across the maps. The system isn't going to save Amy, so I need to. Shannon studied the material spread before them. What am I looking at? Ryan's routines, his job sites, his favorite bars, his apartment building, his weaknesses. Emmett pulled out a separate folder. And this is everything I found about him. Foster care records, employment history, the truth about what he is. Shannon opened the folder, reading through the documents. When she looked up, her expression had hardened. So, what's the plan? I'm going to give him a choice, Emmett said. Sign over custody of Amy, leave town, or face consequences he can't imagine. And if he doesn't choose, then I stop giving him choices. They worked through the night, refining the plan. Shannon, it turned out, had skills Emmett hadn't fully appreciated. She had connections through her art programs, including a lawyer friend who specialized in family law and a former student who now worked in investigative journalism. We need more evidence, Shannon said, something that can't be explained away. I've been thinking about that. Emmett pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos he'd taken during surveillance. 3 times in the past week, I've seen Ryan meet with this guy. He showed her a picture of a thin man with a scraggly beard and nervous eyes. His name is Marcus Coleman, small-time dealer. I did some digging. He's also Ryan's old foster brother. They were in the same home for 2 years when they were kids. So Ryan's using. Probably. But more importantly, Marcus might know things, might have seen things. Drug dealers tend to be observant about their clients' homes. It's survival instinct. Shannon nodded slowly. You think you can get him to talk? Everyone talks if you find the right pressure point. The next evening, Emmett found Marcus Coleman behind the convenience store where he apparently conducted his business. The guy spotted Emmett approaching and immediately tensed, ready to run. Relax, Emmett said, raising his hands. I'm not a cop. I'm Ryan's brother. Marcus squinted at him in the dim light. Didn't know Ryan had a brother. Yeah, well, there's a lot Ryan doesn't advertise. Emmett leaned against the wall, casual, unthreatening. I need information. I don't talk about my clients, man. Bad for business. Even when your client is hurting a kid? That got Marcus's attention. What? You've been to Ryan's place, right? Delivered there, maybe. Did you ever see his daughter? Little girl, 6 years old? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I seen her. So what? Did you notice anything strange about her? Look, man, I don't know what you're getting at. Her fingers, Marcus. Did you notice her fingers? Marcus went very still. That was an accident. Ryan said it wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose with bolt cutters because she spilled milk. No way. Ryan's a jerk sometimes, but he wouldn't. Yes, he would. And you know it, don't you? You've seen how he treats her. You've seen the fear. Marcus rubbed his face with shaking hands. I don't want any part of this. Too late. You're already part of it. Emmett straightened, moving closer. Not threatening, but present. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write down everything you've seen at that apartment. Every mark on that kid. Every scream you heard. Every time Ryan was high and angry. You're going to sign it. And if I don't? Then I call the cops right now and tell them about your inventory. I've been watching you for 3 days, Marcus. I know exactly how much you're holding, and I know that with your record, that's enough for a 10-year stretch. Marcus's face went pale. You're bluffing. Emmett pulled out his phone, showed him photos. Marcus making deals. Marcus with product visible, timestamps and locations documented. I'm an engineer, Marcus. I'm very thorough. 20 minutes later, Emmett had a signed statement from Marcus Coleman detailing 3 instances where he'd witnessed Ryan's abuse. Screaming at Amy until she wet herself, dragging her by her hair to her room, and once, in a moment that made Emmett's blood run cold, holding her hand over a hot stove burner while she screamed. He said it was discipline, Marcus wrote in messy handwriting. Said his old man did it to him and it made him strong. I told him it was messed up, but he said mind my own business. Emmett added the statement to his growing file. It still wasn't enough for a criminal case. Marcus was a junkie with a record, his credibility shot, but it was another piece of the puzzle. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 2 days later, Shannon's journalist friend, Thomas Lambert, called with information. I did some digging on your brother, like you asked. Found something interesting. What? There's an old police report from 5 years ago before he moved to your area. A neighbor called in a domestic disturbance. Cops found Christy with bruises, Amy hiding in a closet. They were living in Texas at the time. What happened? Report says Christy claims she fell, that Amy was just playing hide and seek. No charges filed, but here's the thing. The responding officer made a note. Said the scene felt wrong, that Christy seemed terrified. He recommended a follow-up, but there's no record of one happening. The family moved 2 weeks later. Can you give me a copy of that report? Already on its way to your email. Emmett thanked him and hung up, then immediately called Shannon. We've got him. We've got a pattern spanning multiple states, multiple incidents, documentation from police and medical professionals. It's not perfect, but it's enough. Enough for what? Enough to ruin him. That night, Emmett assembled everything into a comprehensive dossier: medical records, neighbor testimonies, Marcus's statement, the Texas police report, photographs of the apartment building and Ryan's frequented locations, employment records showing long periods of unemployment during which Amy's injuries seemed to spike. He created a timeline, cross-referenced everything, documented gaps where official systems had failed to act. It was, in its own way, a work of art. A damning portrait of systematic abuse and institutional failure. So what now? Shannon asked, looking over his shoulder at the completed work. Now comes the hard part, Emmett said. I need to talk to Christy. Shannon's lawyer friend, Laura Hernandez, had agreed to help. Off the record, she was careful to specify. She'd arranged for Christy to meet them at a neutral location, a small diner on the outskirts of town where no one would recognize them. Christy arrived, looking even thinner than Emmett remembered, her eyes darting around nervously. She slid into the booth across from him and Shannon, her hands twisting together on the table. What's this about? She asked. Ryan doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out... He's hurting Amy, Emmett said, deciding on directness. And you know it. Christy's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Her fingers, Christy. He cut them off. That was an accident. Stop. Emmett slid the folder across the table. I know everything. I have documentation going back years. Police reports, medical records, witness statements. I know about Texas. I know about the broken arm, the concussion, the burns. I know what he is, and I know that you've been helping him hide it. Christy's hands were shaking now. You don't understand. Then help me understand. For a long moment, Christy just stared at the folder. Then slowly she opened it. As she read, tears began streaming down her face. I didn't know it would be like this, she whispered. When we met, he was different. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already pregnant. She wiped her eyes. You can't understand what it's like, living with him. He's always watching, always controlling. If I try to leave, he says he'll kill me. If I try to protect Amy, he turns his anger on both of us. I've tried to get help, but no one believes me. I'm just a crazy wife, a bad mother who can't control her kid. Shannon reached across the table, taking Christy's hand. We believe you. It doesn't matter. He'll never let us go. And even if he did, where would we go? I don't have family. No money of my own. He controls everything. Emmett leaned forward. What if I told you I could make him go away? Permanently. Christy looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean that I'm going to give Ryan a choice. He can sign over custody of Amy to you, provide financial support, and leave the state. Or I can make sure this file ends up with every journalist, every police department, every judge in the county. I can make his life so miserable that leaving becomes his only option. He'll never agree to that. Then I'll make him. Emmett smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Let me worry about that. What I need from you is your cooperation. You're Amy's mother. If you petition for sole custody, if you testify about the abuse, if you stand with her, we can win this. But I need you to be brave. Christy was silent for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up, and Emmett saw something new in her eyes. Determination. Okay, she said. Tell me what to do. Laura walked them through the legal process. Emergency custody petition, restraining order, divorce filing. It would take time and it wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. The key, Laura explained, is documentation. Everything Emmett's gathered helps, but we need Christy's testimony. You were there. You witnessed it. That carries weight. What if the judge doesn't believe me? Christy asked, her voice small. Then we make sure there's so much evidence they have no choice, Emmett said. Over the next few days, they prepared. Christy moved out while Ryan was at work, taking Amy with her. She went to stay with her sister 2 towns over, someone Ryan had forbidden her from seeing for years. Laura filed the paperwork, and suddenly, the legal machinery was in motion. Ryan's response was predictable. Rage. He called Emmett's phone 17 times in one evening. The voicemails progressed from confused to angry to threatening. Emmett saved every single one. Then came the text. We need to talk. Meet me at Mayfield construction site, 8 p.m. Important. Emmett stared at the message. Mayfield Construction didn't exist. He'd created it as a shell company weeks ago, anticipating this moment. Shannon had helped set up the website, the phone number, even some fake employee profiles. The site was an abandoned warehouse complex that Emmett had found during his surveillance, a place where no one would hear anything they didn't want heard. I'm going, he told Shannon that evening. Not alone, you're not. If this goes wrong, I need you free and clear, with an alibi. What are you going to do? Have a conversation. He pulled her close. Just a conversation, for now. Shannon looked at him with those knowing eyes, seeing past the calm exterior to the cold fury underneath. Be careful. Always. At 7:45, Emmett arrived at the warehouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed obscenely beautiful given what was about to happen. He checked his equipment one final time. Voice recorder working, phone fully charged, flashlight ready. He'd also brought something else, something he hoped he wouldn't need, but had learned long ago to never be unprepared. A tire iron, not for violence, at least not initially, but for intimidation, and if necessary, protection. At 8:03, headlights swept across the broken windows as Ryan's truck pulled into the lot. Emmett watched from the shadows as his brother climbed out, looking around suspiciously. Ryan had always had a survivor's instincts. It's what had kept him afloat through a chaotic childhood. But those instincts were dulled by alcohol and arrogance, and that's what Emmett was counting on. Emmett! Ryan called out. Where are you, man? This place is creepy as hell. Inside, Emmett called back. Second door on the left. Ryan muttered something under his breath but followed the directions, pulling open the rusty door and stepping into the warehouse. Emmett had positioned the lights to blind anyone coming from outside, and Ryan shielded his eyes, squinting into the brightness. "What's with the dramatic setup?" Ryan asked, irritation clear in his voice. "Where's the Mayfield guy you wanted me to meet?" "There is no Mayfield," Emmett said, stepping into the light. "It's just us." Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "The hell, man? Why'd you drag me out here with some fake job?" "Because we need to talk. Privately." "About what?" "About Amy." The change in Ryan was instant. His shoulders tensed, his eyes narrowed. "My daughter is none of your goddamn business." "She became my business the moment I saw what you did to her." "I don't know what you're talking about." Emmett pulled out his phone, showed him a photo he'd taken at the barbecue. Amy in her mittens, sweat pouring down her face. The mittens in August, Ryan. The terror in her eyes. The missing fingers. "She had an accident. Don't." Emmett's voice cut like a blade. "Don't insult my intelligence. I know what you did. I know how you did it. And I know it wasn't the first time you've hurt her." Ryan's jaw clenched. "You've been spying on me." "I've been investigating you." "There's a difference." Emmett pulled out a folder. Not the full dossier, just enough to make his point. Police reports from Texas. Medical records. Witness statements. "I've got everything, Ryan. Every mark you've left on that child. Every time the system looked the other way. Every lie you've told. She's my kid. I discipline her my way. That's my right as a parent. Cutting off a 6-year-old's fingers isn't discipline. It's torture." Ryan's face flushed red. "You don't know what it's like, raising a kid who won't listen, who's always making mistakes. She's 6 years old." Emmett's composure finally cracked. "She's a child, Ryan, a baby, and you mutilated her because she spilled milk. She needs to learn." "Learn what? Fear? Pain? That the people who are supposed to love her are actually monsters?" Ryan took a step forward, and Emmett saw the violence in his eyes. The same violence their foster system records had documented. "Watch your mouth, brother. Or what? You'll do to me what you did to Amy?" Emmett stood his ground. "I'm not 6 years old, Ryan. I'm not helpless, and I'm not afraid of you." For a moment, they stood there, two men separated by blood, but divided by everything else. Then Ryan laughed, harsh and ugly. "You think you're better than me? You think because you got lucky, found some nice family to take you in, got yourself a degree and a pretty wife, that you're superior? We came from the same place, Emmett. The same broken homes, the same abuse, the same system that didn't give a damn whether we lived or died. The only difference is I'm honest about what it made me." "No," Emmett said quietly. "The difference is I chose not to become the thing that hurt me. You chose to perpetuate it." "Spare me the therapy talk. What do you want?" "I want you to sign over custody of Amy to Christy, provide financial support, and leave the state." Ryan stared at him, then burst out laughing. "You're insane." "I'm serious." "And why the hell would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll destroy you. This file goes to every news outlet in the state. I'll make sure everyone knows what you are, your employers, your friends, every contractor you've ever worked with. I'll make it impossible for you to get a job, rent an apartment, show your face in public without people knowing you're a child abuser. Your life won't be worth living." Ryan's laughter died. "You wouldn't. Try me." They stared at each other in the harsh warehouse light, and Emmett could see Ryan calculating, weighing his options. Finally, Ryan shook his head. "You've got nothing. CPS already cleared me. That file you're so proud of? It's just circumstantial crap that won't hold up anywhere. You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Yeah, you are. Because you're not like me, remember? You follow rules. You believe in the system. You won't actually do anything illegal or dangerous because that's not who you are." Ryan smiled, cruel and confident. "You're all talk, brother. Always have been." Emmett reached into his pocket and pulled out the tire iron, letting it hang casually at his side. "You're right about one thing. I do believe in rules, but I believe in justice more." Ryan's eyes fixed on the tire iron. "What, you gonna beat me up? That's your plan?" "No. Violence is your solution, not mine. I'm smarter than that." Emmett tapped the tire iron against his palm. "But I need you to understand something, Ryan. I will do whatever it takes to protect Amy. Whatever it takes. And I'm not bound by the same restraints you think I am. Push me. And you'll find out exactly what I'm capable of. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Ryan's face. He'd expected anger, expected threats, but this cold, controlled determination was something else entirely. You have until Friday, Emmett said. Sign the papers Christie's lawyer will serve you, or the file gets released, your choice. And if I refuse? Then pray you're ready for what comes next. Emmett walked out of the warehouse, leaving Ryan standing in a circle of light. He didn't look back. Behind him, he could hear his brother cursing, kicking at equipment, his frustration echoing through the empty space. In his pocket, the voice recorder had captured every word. Ryan didn't go home after the warehouse. Instead, he drove straight to Max's and proceeded to get spectacularly drunk. The bartender, a woman named Gina Stark, who'd seen her share of desperate men over the years, watched him with concern as he downed whiskey after whiskey. "You okay, Ryan?" she asked during a brief lull. "My brother's trying to steal my kid," he slurred. "Says I'm not fit to be a father." "Are you? Fit to be a father?" Gina leaned against the bar, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "I've known you 3 years, Ryan. I've seen you drink away rent money, get in fights over nothing, talk about your kid like she's a burden instead of a blessing. So I'm asking, are you fit?" Ryan stared at her, then slammed his glass down. "Screw you." He stumbled out into the parking lot, fumbling for his keys. His phone rang. Christie, probably wondering where he was. He ignored it. His head was spinning, partly from the alcohol, but mostly from rage. Who the hell did Emmett think he was? Mr. Perfect with his perfect wife and perfect house, judging Ryan's life like he had any right. They'd both suffered as kids, both been abandoned by parents who couldn't be bothered. The difference was that Emmett had gotten lucky, been taken in by those Henderson people who'd filled his head with ideas about betterment and second chances. Ryan had gotten no such luck. He'd aged out of foster care at 18 with $200 and a garbage bag full of clothes. He'd learned that the world didn't give a damn about broken kids, that you had to take what you wanted because no one was giving anything away for free. And Amy was his to raise how he saw fit, his to teach the hard lessons life had taught him. If Emmett couldn't understand that, well, that was his problem. But as Ryan drove home, taking turns too fast and swerving between lanes, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered, "What if he does it? What if he releases that file?" The public humiliation, the judgment, the possible police involvement, it painted a picture Ryan didn't like. He'd worked hard to build his reputation such as it was. He was a functioning member of society, paid his bills, usually, held down jobs, sometimes. He wasn't some monster. He was just tough, demanding. His own father had been worse, and Ryan had turned out fine, hadn't he? When he pulled into his apartment complex, he sat in the truck for a long time, engine idling. Through the window of his unit, he could see nothing. The lights were off. Something was wrong. He stumbled to the door, fumbled with his keys, pushed inside. "Christie? Amy?" Silence. He turned on the lights. The apartment was eerily clean, but something was missing. Christie's things, Amy's stuffed animals, the family photos that used to sit on the bookshelf. On the kitchen table, he found an envelope. Inside were legal documents, divorce petition, emergency custody order, restraining order. Ryan's hands shook as he read. Christie had filed for sole custody of Amy, citing a pattern of abuse and neglect. A judge had granted temporary custody pending a hearing. He was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from both of them. His phone rang again. Unknown number, he answered, still drunk enough to be reckless. "Mr. Livingston, this is Thomas Lambert. I'm a journalist with the County Herald. I'd like to ask you some questions about allegations of child abuse." Ryan's blood ran cold. "What? Who told you?" "We've received some documentation that raises serious concerns about your treatment of your daughter Amy. Would you care to comment?" "I don't have to tell you." Ryan hung up, his hands shaking. It was starting. Emmett was actually doing it. Over the next 2 days, Ryan's world began to unravel. The journalist called back twice more, leaving voicemails. His boss at the roofing company pulled him aside, asking if there were any issues at home he needed to disclose. Even his landlord stopped him in the hallway, giving him a look that suggested he'd heard rumors. Emmett was being strategic, Ryan realized. He wasn't releasing everything at once. He was letting it leak, letting the whispers build, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that was almost worse than outright accusation. Ryan tried calling Christie. Her number was disconnected. He tried calling Emmett, straight to voicemail. He sat alone in his apartment that night, surrounded by beer cans and legal documents, trying to think. He could fight this, hire a lawyer, contest the custody filing, claim Emmett and Christie were conspiring against him. But that would mean court, judges examining his life, the risk of that file becoming official evidence. And what if they believed Emmett? What if they took Amy away and sent Ryan to prison? Or he could run, pack up, leave the state, start over somewhere new. He'd done it before, but that felt like losing, like letting Emmett win. There was a third option, though, one that made the rage in Ryan's chest burn hotter. He could eliminate the problem at its source. Ryan pulled out his phone and made a call to an old contact, someone who owed him a favor, someone who didn't ask questions. "I need a gun," he said, "and I need it tonight." Emmett was working in his garage on Saturday afternoon, organizing tools, when he sensed rather than heard someone behind him. Years of living in rough foster homes had given him instincts about danger, and those instincts were screaming now. He turned to find Ryan standing in the open garage door. One look at his brother's face told Emmett this was the confrontation he'd been anticipating. "We need to talk," Ryan said, his voice flat. "So talk." "Not here. Come take a ride with me." "I don't think so." Ryan pulled his shirt aside slightly, showing the grip of a gun tucked into his waistband. "I insist." Emmett's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd prepared for this possibility, planned for it even. Shannon was visiting her mother, his idea, getting her away from the house just in case. His phone was in his pocket, still recording everything thanks to an app he'd set up. "Okay," Emmett said carefully. "Let's go." They drove in Ryan's truck to the same abandoned warehouse where they'd met before. Fitting, Emmett thought. Poetic even. Inside, Ryan kicked the door shut behind them and pulled out the gun. "You've ruined everything," he said. "My marriage, my reputation, my life, all because you couldn't mind your own business. I made you a fair offer. You chose not to take it." "Fair?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "There's nothing fair about it. You're trying to steal my family based on lies and exaggerations. Amy's fine. She's always been fine." "Show me your hands, Ryan." "What?" "Your hands. Hold them up." Confused, Ryan did. The gun still pointed vaguely in Emmett's direction. 10 fingers, Emmett said. "Amy has 7. Do the math." Ryan's face twisted. "That was an accident." "Stop lying." Emmett's control finally cracked. "Stop lying to me, to yourself, to everyone. You cut off a 6-year-old's fingers because she spilled milk. What kind of monster does that?" "The kind of monster this world made," Ryan shouted back. "You think you're better than me because you rose above it? Because you found people to save you? I didn't get saved, Emmett. I got spit out by the system and told to fend for myself. Everything I am, everything I've done, it's because I had to survive. That doesn't give you the right to hurt an innocent child." "She's my child, mine to raise, mine to teach, mine to—" "She's not yours anymore." Emmett straightened, facing down the gun. "Christie has temporary custody as of this morning. A judge signed the order. Amy's safe now, away from you." The color drained from Ryan's face. "You're lying." "Call Christie. Ask for yourself." Ryan pulled out his phone with his free hand, dialed. After a moment, Emmett heard a woman's voice answer. Not Christie's voice, but Laura Hernandez, the lawyer. "Mr. Livingston," Laura said, her voice professional and cold. "This call is being recorded. I'm advising you not to make any threats or contact your wife or daughter directly. Any communication should go through your legal counsel." Ryan hung up, staring at the phone. Then his eyes fixed on Emmett, and in them was pure murder. "This is all your fault," he whispered. "Everything. If you just stayed out of it, if you just let things be, Amy would have what? Died? Lost more fingers? Grown up so traumatized she'd never recover?" Emmett shook his head. "I couldn't let that happen. So you destroyed me instead. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it." Ryan raised the gun, pointing it directly at Emmett's chest. His hand was shaking. "Maybe I should just end this. Kill you, then myself. We both know the world won't miss guys like us anyway." "Go ahead." Emmett's voice was steady. "But it won't change anything. The file's with multiple people. Shannon has copies. So does Laura. So does the journalist. My death would just make you a murderer on top of everything else. And Amy would grow up knowing her father killed her uncle because he tried to protect her. The gun wavered. Put it down, Ryan, Emmett said quietly. This doesn't have to end in blood. How else can it end? You've taken everything from me. No, you lost everything yourself, through your own choices. I just held up a mirror. For a long moment, they stood there. Two brothers, two men shaped by the same painful past but taking vastly different paths. The gun continued to shake in Ryan's hand, his finger on the trigger, and Emmett wondered if this was how it ended. Then, slowly, Ryan lowered the weapon. He slumped against the wall, sliding down to sit on the concrete floor. And for the first time since Emmett had known him, Ryan started to cry. I don't know how to be better, he choked out. I don't know how to not be this. It's all I've ever known. Emmett stood over his brother, feeling a complicated mix of pity and disgust. Then learn. Get therapy. Get sober. Get help. But do it far away from Amy. She's my daughter. Not anymore. Not after what you've done. Ryan looked up at him, and in his eyes was something broken and bitter. You win, brother. Congratulations. You get to be the hero. I don't want to be a hero. I just want Amy to be safe. Emmett pulled out his phone, called a number he'd hoped he wouldn't need. When Detective Barnwell answered, he said simply, There's something you need to see. The courtroom was smaller than Emmett had imagined, less dramatic than television made them seem, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. Ryan sat at the defendant's table looking diminished. His lawyer, a public defender named Simon Henry, who'd been handed a case he couldn't possibly win, shuffling papers with the air of a man going through the motions. Across the aisle, Christy sat with Laura Hernandez, Amy between them. The little girl wore long sleeves despite it being late September, and Emmett knew she was still self-conscious about her hands. Emmett himself sat in the gallery next to Shannon, who squeezed his hand as the judge entered. Judge Rebecca Melbeck was a woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. She'd seen hundreds of custody cases, but as she reviewed the file before her, even her experienced composure seemed shaken. This is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered in 30 years on the bench, she said, looking directly at Ryan. Mr. Livingston, do you understand the severity of the charges? Ryan's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client maintains that the injury to his daughter was accidental. Sit down, Mr. Henry, Judge Melbeck's voice cut through the courtroom. I've reviewed the medical records, the witness statements, and the physical evidence. 3 fingers severed at nearly identical points, with tool marks consistent with bolt cutters as determined by forensic analysis. This was no accident. She turned to Christy. Mrs. Livingston, you're seeking sole custody and a permanent restraining order against your husband. Is that correct? Christy stood, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Yes, Your Honor. I should have protected my daughter sooner. I should have been stronger, but I'm protecting her now. Tell me about the incident with the fingers. Christy took a breath. Amy had spilled her milk 3 times that week. Ryan, my husband, he'd been drinking. He was angry. Said she needed to learn consequences. He made her put her hand on the workbench in the garage. I heard her screaming, and when I ran out, she broke down, unable to continue. Laura Hernandez stood, placing a hand on her client's shoulder. Your Honor, if I may, Mrs. Livingston was also a victim of abuse. She was terrified for her own safety and felt powerless to intervene. She's since gotten therapy and restraining orders, and she's committed to ensuring her daughter's safety going forward. Judge Melbeck's expression softened slightly. I understand. She turned to Amy. Sweetheart, can you come up here? Amy looked up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. The little girl climbed down and approached the bench. The bailiff brought a step stool so she could see the judge. Hi, Amy, Judge Melbeck said gently. I know this is scary. I just need to ask you a few questions. Okay. Amy nodded, her good hand gripping the railing. Do you know why we're all here? Because Daddy hurt me. Can you show me your hands? Slowly, Amy pulled off her gloves. The courtroom collectively held its breath as her mutilated left hand became visible. The scars were healed, but livid, the missing fingers creating an absence that was somehow worse than their presence would have been. Did your daddy do that on purpose? Amy nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Did he say why? He said I needed to learn. That if I kept being clumsy, I wouldn't need fingers at all. The courtroom was silent, except for someone in the gallery crying softly. Are you scared of your daddy? Yes. Do you want to live with him again? No. Please, no. Amy's voice rose in panic, and Christy rushed forward to embrace her daughter. Judge Melbeck's jaw was tight. Thank you, Amy. You're very brave. You can go sit with your mama now. As Christy led Amy back to their seats, the judge turned to Ryan. Mr. Livingston, do you have anything to say for yourself? Ryan stood slowly. His lawyer tried to stop him, but he waved the man off. I'm not going to sit here and claim I'm innocent. I did what the record says I did. A murmur ran through the courtroom. But I'm not the villain everyone wants to make me out to be. I grew up in the same system that destroyed me. I learned violence from people who were supposed to teach me love. I'm a product of institutional failure. That may be true, Judge Melbeck said coldly, but it doesn't excuse what you did to a helpless child. Plenty of people suffer abuse and don't become abusers themselves. Your brother, for instance. She gestured to Emmett in the gallery. Mr. Maddox, would you approach the bench? Emmett stood, surprised. He'd submitted written testimony, but hadn't expected to be called. Mr. Maddox, you and the defendant share a background of foster care and childhood trauma. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Yet you've never harmed a child. No, ma'am. Why not? Emmett thought for a moment. Because I decided the cycle had to stop somewhere, that I wouldn't pass on the pain that was given to me. It's a choice, Your Honor. Not an easy one, but a choice nonetheless. Judge Melbeck nodded. Indeed, thank you. She turned back to Ryan. Mr. Livingston, I'm granting Mrs. Livingston sole custody of Amy. You are hereby ordered to have no contact with your daughter until she turns 18. At which point she may choose whether to have a relationship with you. You will pay child support in an amount to be determined. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. What you did constitutes aggravated child abuse, and you will answer for it in criminal court. Ryan's face had gone white. Your Honor, I'm not finished. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Amy and Mrs. Livingston at all times. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. The criminal trial came 3 months later. The prosecutor, a steely woman named Phoebe Richards, built an airtight case. Medical experts, Christie's testimony, Marcus Coleman's statement, Mrs. Patterson's observations, the Texas police report. The most damaging testimony came from Ryan himself. Against his lawyer's advice, he insisted on taking the stand. I love my daughter, he said, tears streaming down his face. Everything I did to make her better, to make her stronger, to prepare her for a world that doesn't give second chances. By cutting off her fingers? Phoebe Richards asked, incredulous. She wouldn't learn any other way. She was always dropping things, breaking things, being careless. I tried grounding her, tried talking to her. Nothing worked, so I showed her the consequences of carelessness. You showed a 6-year-old child the consequences of being 6. I showed her that actions have consequences. And now she'll spend the rest of her life with a permanent disability because she spilled milk. That seems proportional to you? Ryan opened his mouth, closed it. On the witness stand, under the harsh lights and the weight of judgment, he seemed to finally understand how his actions looked to normal people. I didn't think about it like that. No, Mr. Livingston, you didn't think. That's the problem. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came a month later. Judge Melbeck, who'd requested to preside over this phase as well, looked down at Ryan with cold contempt. Mr. Livingston, you took something precious from your daughter, not just her fingers, but her sense of safety, her trust, her childhood. The law sets a maximum sentence of 15 years for aggravated child abuse. I'm giving you 12, with no possibility of parole for 8. Perhaps in that time, you'll come to understand the magnitude of what you've done. Ryan was led away in handcuffs. As he passed Emmett in the gallery, their eyes met one final time. There was no apology in Ryan's gaze, no remorse, just a dull acceptance. Outside the courthouse, Thomas Lambert approached Emmett. Mr. Maddox, can I ask how you're feeling? Emmett considered the question. Relieved, sad, angry that it took this long. Hopeful that Amy can heal now. Some people are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do when they see a child being hurt. But not everyone does. That's what makes it heroic. Emmett shook his head. The real heroes are the kids who survive, who find ways to heal despite everything. Amy's the hero here. The interview ran the next day under the headline, Brother's Courage Saves Niece from Abuse. It led to policy changes in how CPS handled cases, new training for caseworkers, renewed scrutiny of the foster care system that had failed both Emmett and Ryan in different ways. 6 months after the trial, on a warm spring afternoon, Emmett stood in his backyard watching Amy play. Christy had moved into a small house nearby, and they'd become regulars at Sunday dinners. Amy was seeing a therapist twice a week, slowly processing her trauma, learning that the world could be safe. She'd started wearing a prosthetic, a colorful device she'd helped design, covered in stickers and bright patterns. It makes me look like a superhero, she'd told him proudly. Some days she wore it, some days she didn't. It was her choice. Uncle Emmett, she called now. Watch this. She climbed the ladder to the treehouse he'd built last month, navigating with the confidence of any 7-year-old. At the top, she waved, both hands, prosthetic and real, and he waved back. Shannon came out with lemonade, settling into the chair beside him. How are you doing? She asked. Good. And it was true. The weight he'd carried since that day at the barbecue, since discovering Amy's secret, had lifted. Not completely. He still had nightmares sometimes, still felt rage when he thought about what Ryan had done, but it was manageable now. Christy told me she got a job, Shannon said. Receptionist at a dental office. Good benefits, decent pay. That's great. She's stronger than she thought she was. Most people are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Amy play. Eventually, Christy joined them, and they talked about normal things. The weather, upcoming school events, plans for summer vacation. Normal life, without fear lurking in every corner. Later, after Christy and Amy had gone home, Emmett found himself in his home office, looking at the file he'd assembled. All that research, all those hours of investigation and planning. He thought about throwing it away, but Shannon had convinced him to keep it. It's a reminder, she'd said, of what you're capable of when someone you love is threatened. He understood what she meant. He'd learned something about himself during those months, that he could be cold, calculating, even ruthless when necessary. It wasn't something he was particularly proud of, but it was good to know. Just in case, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello, Mr. Maddox. This is Dale Williamson. You don't know me, but I read about your case in the papers. The one with your brother. Okay. I have a nephew. He's 8, and I think something's wrong. He won't talk about it, but he's got bruises, and he flinches around his stepdad, and I don't know what to do. Emmett closed his eyes. Of course. There were always more children, more situations, more Amys waiting for someone to see them. Mr. Williamson, he said, let me tell you what you're going to do. As he walked Dale through the steps, document everything, call CPS, be persistent, don't give up. Emmett realized this was his new purpose. He couldn't save every child, couldn't fix every broken family, but he could use what he'd learned, the system he'd mapped out, to help others navigate these waters. A week later, Shannon came home with a proposal. I've been thinking, what if we formalized this? Created a nonprofit to help people in situations like Amy's. Education, resources, legal support. You mean make it official? You've already helped 3 families in the past month, might as well do it right. They called it the Henderson Foundation, in honor of the couple who'd taken Emmett in and shown him what real family looked like. It started small, just a website and a phone number, but word spread. Within a year, they were helping dozens of families, providing resources that hadn't existed before, creating a network of support. Amy helped too, in her way. On her 8th birthday, she asked if she could make a video for the foundation website telling her story. With Christy's permission and a therapist present, she did. My name is Amy, she said to the camera, holding up her prosthetic hand. My daddy hurt me because he was sick, but I'm okay now because my uncle believed me. If someone is hurting you, tell someone. Keep telling until someone believes you. There are people who will help. You're not alone. The video went viral. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. Amy became a face for child abuse prevention, her resilience inspiring others to come forward. Emmett watched his niece grow into a confident, articulate young girl, and he thought about Ryan sitting in a prison cell, probably telling himself he'd done nothing wrong. Their paths had diverged so completely, both products of the same broken system, but making radically different choices. 3 years after the barbecue, on another summer afternoon that echoed that first one, Emmett hosted another family gathering. Amy was there, 9 years old now, playing with Shannon's nieces and nephews without self-consciousness. Christy was there with a new boyfriend, a gentleman who worked as a teacher and treated Amy like she was precious. The Hendersons were there too, Martha and Bill, elderly now but still sharp, still the closest thing to parents Emmett had ever known. They'd been horrified by what happened with Ryan, but proud of how Emmett had handled it. "You did good, son," Bill told him, gripping his shoulder. "You saved that little girl." "I just did what you taught me," Emmett replied, "to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves." As the sun set and fireflies emerged, Amy came running up to Emmett. "Uncle Emmett, will you push me on the swing?" "Always." He pushed her higher and higher, her laughter rising into the twilight sky. And he thought about how close they'd come to losing her, how many children were lost because no one looked closely enough, cared deeply enough, fought hard enough. But not Amy. Amy was safe. Amy was loved. Amy was going to be okay. And that, Emmett thought as he watched her soar through the air, was worth everything. The story could end there, with Amy laughing and healing, with Emmett finding purpose, with justice served. But the real ending is quieter, more complicated. Amy grows up. She struggles sometimes, nightmares, anxiety, trust issues, but she also thrives. She becomes an advocate herself, speaking at schools about abuse prevention. She learns to sculpt with her remaining fingers, creating beautiful art from pain. Christy finds herself again, the person she'd been before fear consumed her. She goes back to school, becomes a social worker, specifically to help families in crisis. Emmett and Shannon eventually have children of their own, twin girls who grow up knowing Amy's story, learning from it, understanding that safety and love aren't guaranteed but fought for. And Ryan, he serves his sentence. He never fully grasps the magnitude of his crimes, never develops real remorse, but he stops fighting against the reality of what he is. In prison, he keeps to himself, works in the library, slowly becomes a cautionary tale for other inmates with children. The system doesn't fix itself overnight, but small changes accumulate. Caseworkers are better trained, warning signs are taken more seriously, the Henderson Foundation provides resources that help thousands of families. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's better, and on summer afternoons, when Emmett hears a child laugh with pure joy, he remembers why he fought so hard. Not for revenge or justice in the abstract, but for moments exactly like these, simple, beautiful, ordinary moments that every child deserves. That's the real victory. Not Ryan's prison sentence or the awards the Henderson Foundation receives, but Amy's laughter, her healing, her future. Everything else is just details.